To make the Cornish pasties, you need to start with making your short crust pastry. So in my bowl I have 200 grams of plain flour, 50 grams of white vegetable fat and 50 grams of margarine. And the first thing that you need to do is rub this with your fingertips until it looks like breadcrumbs, remembering that you need to scoop a little bit of flour, a little bit of fat, and just rub the two together. Rub your thumbs over your fingertips, turning your bowl inside with your hands like this until the mixture resembles breadcrumbs and you can't see any more large lumps of fat. And after a few minutes you should find that your mixture's changed colour and it's nice golden brown, the fat's evenly distributed and it looks like breadcrumbs. If you're not sure if you've rubbed in enough, remember, shake your bowl and any large lumps of fat will come up to the surface. Be careful not to over rub this because we need to get the water in. And as we have 200 grams of flour, you need 5 mils of water for every 25 grams of flour. So that would be 8 teaspoons or 40 mils of cold water. So I'm just going to put in my 40 mils of cold water and stir this with a knife to start with. Don't put your hands in the mixture to start with, we want to use a knife and just cut through this and see if the mixture starts to stick together. And once you can see that it's starting to form balls, or starting to form a ball and stick together, if it doesn't start to stick together, add just a teaspoon extra water. Don't put too much in at one go. Just add your extra water, a teaspoon at a time. But I can see that's starting to stick together, so I'm going to put my hands in and squeeze and get this all to knead together. And what you should find is that you have one nice ball of pastry and a bowl with no crumbs in it. There we go. So one ball of pastry and my bowl can go out of the way. So I'm just going to put a little bit of flour on my worktop, not loads, just a little bit, and just knead that gently to start with. Don't want to do it too much because I don't want to overwork the pastry. This amount of mixture should make you 2 pasties. So the first thing to do is cut your mixture in half and roll 1 pastie at a time. And ideally, if you want traditional pasty shape, we want your dough to be round before you start. So a little bit of flour underneath and roll gently away from you, turning the pastry, remember, each time you roll. If you remember to turn your pastry every time you roll, it should not stick, excuse me, to your worktop. And if you get a few little cracks at the edges of your pastry, don't worry about that. This is not now perfectly round, it's still reasonably round. If you get really worried about it, just pinch the edges of your pastry all the way round. Just use your thumbs, fingertips, pinch the edges of your pastry and just reshape it a little bit into a round if you need to. So once away from you, slight turn, roll again. And you need to keep going until you've got something that's about the size of a tea plate. So a nice round shape. Unfortunately I haven't got any round tea plates, or I would cut around this, but we don't want the pastry to be too thin, so that's fine. It's not too thick. And I'm going to just roll the second piece now and then I can clean the worktop. To To start the filling off, I'm just going to dissolve a stock cube in water. This is half a beef stock cube, and I'm just going to add a tablespoon, just over a tablespoon of boiling water to that. It's a rectangular stock cube, not a square one like an OXO, so it's only really going to dissolve in boiling water. So that just needs to be stirred up for a little while and then left on the side to dissolve in the water. You don't want to add loads of liquid to this filling, or it will all come out in the pasty. And then we need to do the vegetables. So for this pasty recipe, I've got a carrot, which I'm just going to quickly peel onto a plate. You don't need large vegetables for this Cornish pasties, otherwise the filling tends to be too much for the amount of pastry you made. So I've got a smallish carrot, a small potato that just need to be peeled, and you can get rid of the rubbish. I like to do the peelings onto a plate or into a bowl so that I can just get rid of them, and half an onion. So I've got a red onion. Remember, bridge hold through your onion. I'm only going to use half of this, and if you cut it in half, remember it is much easier then to just peel off a layer of the onion. Make sure that you have all of the dry skin gone. Take the root off and put that out of the way. So the onion needs to be finely chopped. Don't leave this in chunks. So remember, bridge hold, nice, small, thin cuts. Take your time doing this, nearly to the end of the onion. Don't go all the way to the end of the onion, or you'll have your pieces falling apart. And then turn it around. I'd normally do it this way, but bridge hold across the end, small pieces of onion. The smaller you can get your vegetables, the quicker they will cook in your pasty, and the less chance you have of having raw vegetables in there. You don't need to do the whole thing. I'm just going to get rid of that bit. But I have nice small bits of onion there which should cook through quite quickly. So I'm just going to add that to a bowl with the 100 grams of minced beef. So I have my onion to start with, and then I'm going to do the carrot. So both ends off the carrot, and this time I want to dice this. So cut a slice from one side of your carrot so that you can continue to do this without it rolling around. You can chop that up in a minute, and then bridge hold through your fingers again and cut this into thin slices. So this is a good exercise for knife skills. Put a couple of slices of the carrot down on the board, bridge hold again, and cut that through into long thin strips, so not too big. And you can then turn that around, claw grip, and just chop this small. It's nice to see that it is carrot, but at the same time we don't want this to be too big and again not cook. So reasonably small bits of carrot. Do all of your carrot. So again, I've got it in slices, bridge hold through your fingers, and then claw grip and across the end of the carrot, keeping that nice and small. And again, if your carrot is large, don't put the whole carrot in because you're only making 2 pasties. So that's done, and I'm just going to do this a little bit. Last vegetable is the potato, and it's the same thing. I don't want this rolling around while I'm trying to chop it, So I'm going to cut a slice. Cut a slice so the potato stays flat, does not roll around. You can chop that up again in a minute, and it's really the same as the carrot. Through your fingers into slices, because I want to dice the carrot. So hold it together with your hand, cut it down into slices, take 2 or 3 slices at a time, cut it through so that it's like chips, yeah, small French fries, not chunky chips, and then turn it around and cut across the other way so that you have small dice of potato, and you can continue doing that a few slices at a time until you've used all of your potato up. And you can see we only want to make 2 pasties, even though it was a small potato, small carrot with the 100 grams of mince. It's made quite a lot of filling. So I'll do the rest of the potato in a minute. But the last thing to be done is to mix your stock cube. You might need to smush it up a bit. Mix your stock cube in with this filling. I'm not adding any extra salt and pepper because there is a lot of salt and pepper in a stock cube anyway, and although I've only put half a stock cube in, for me that is fine. So just mix that together, and the stock cube will help to season the meat and the vegetables. And now we've got everything ready to assemble the pasties. So I've got my filling, I've got my 2 circles of pastry rolled out, and I've just lightly beaten an egg. You can use water to seal your pasties, but I'm just going to use the egg that I'm going to use to glaze. So I'm going to put my 2 bits of pastry onto my baking tray to start with. If I turn it that way round, it might be easier to see. So I've got my 2 pasties, 2 bits of pastry on my baking tray. And before I do anything else, I'm just going to damp the edges of both of these with the egg, or you can use a little bit of water. And that's just to help seal the pasties when you put the filling in. And then you need to divide this filling in 2, and you can see it's made quite a lot of filling for 2 pasties. So spoon your filling to one side of, to the middle of the pasty if you want it to be a traditional Cornish pasty shape. So if you want to do the upright baby dinosaur, you need your pasty filling in the middle. If you want it to be more like a turnover or a slice, you need to put your filling to one side of the pastry. So I'm going to try and use all of this filling so I don't waste any. But it's quite difficult to fold your pasty if you've got too much filling. So once you put it down, it's quite loose, and what I like to do is I like to just press it together a little bit more so that it holds together. And you can see in both of these, although we've only got 100 grams of mince, there does look to be quite a lot of mince in those. So if we start with the, what I like to think of as the traditional Cornish pasty shape, the baby dinosaur shape, you need to lift your pastry either side of your filling and gently squeeze it together over the top of the filling. So very gently lift it and get it to squeeze together. It'll stick where you've put the egg together, and squeeze that together over the top of your filling. And I'm just going to turn that a little bit that way. So at the moment it's done, but it doesn't look particularly pretty. So you need to crimp the top of this, So just use your fingers to crimp the top. Just use your thumbs and your fingers and move the pastry one side or the other so that you've got an upright pasty. If you're doing the flat one here, then you need to carefully lift your pastry over. Same thing, we're trying to enclose the filling and you've got to squeeze the pastry together at the edges of your pasty. Make sure that you can actually squash that pastry together and not have any filling escape. So I've got a little bit of extra pastry there that I'm just going to cut off because that's just going to be raw pastry and I don't want that. And again, you need to crimp this. I'm just going to move it slightly. Now these are shaped on my baking tray. I'm going to turn that one around that way, they'll fit better. And you can crimp the edge with your fingers like that, or you can use a fork or a knife and make a pattern around the edge of your pasty. If you wish to, one little hole in the top. I'm going to make two in there. I don't normally make a hole in a pasty this shape, just to let some steam out, and then last thing before they go into the oven, we need to brush these with egg to glaze. These are going to take, as the meat in the middle is raw and we want to make sure that it's properly cooked, these need to start off in a nice hot oven. So I'm starting these off at 200 degrees and I am going to check them after 20 minutes. And after 20 minutes I should be able to see that the pastry on the outside has started to cook, but that's not going to be long enough for the filling. So after 20 minutes on 200 degrees, gas mark 6, I'm going to turn the oven down for another 20 minutes to make sure that the filling is cooked. Okay, the Cornish pasties have had 30 minutes in the oven. I didn't turn the oven down, but I can tell that they're cooked because I've got meat filling that's coming out of here. So I've got some of the gravy coming out of the top of the pasty and it's not at all pink. So the Cornish pasties are cooked, the pastry's nice golden brown, and they just need to be left for a few minutes on your baking tray to cool down.